mindful of everyone's time. And so we are going to get started. Just a little housekeeping rules. As you know, we like to record the sessions and make them available for you to access at later times. And so we do ask that if you are not speaking, if you would be so kind as to mute your mics. If you forget to, it's not a problem. We will kindly go down the list and we will check to see who's unmuted, and Jim will go through and mute the mic. If you are calling in and you want to speak, just press *6, and that allows us to hear what you have to say. We will have an opportunity at the end of the session to ask any questions, where you can ask questions to the panelists, when I hope that you have plenty of questions to ask, because all of them come with really good information that I think is helpful for any neighborhood, not just in the city of Norfolk, but anyone that happens to be on the call today or who plans to watch the video at a later date. So we do ask, if you have questions, you can do that one of two ways. If you look to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat function. I think for those of you that have been to our sessions before, you're familiar with this. And so we just ask that you put your questions there, and Jim and I will go through at the end of the session, and we will pull those questions up and ask those of our panelists. They will also have an opportunity to review your questions as well. And there's another feature. So maybe you're a person that you feel that, well, it's easy for me to verbalize my question than to put it in the chat feature. That's fine as well. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the red X button if you want to leave the meeting. Now, don't click that because we want you to stay. But if you go to the left of that, there's the ellipses. Got lots of fun options there. But go over one more time, and you will see an emoticon button. So here's a fun thing. Maybe you want to be interactive throughout the session. You do have the option of if someone says something that you really like, you can give them a thumbs up. You can clap. You can give a smiley face. Hopefully we won't see any sad faces or no thumbs down, because I think this is good information. But you have the option to have gestures. And if you want to ask a question and you want to unmute yourself at the end, then we just ask that up at the top of your options, you'll see the raise the hand feature. As you can see, I've just selected that. The hand will come up on the panel with your name and your picture if you have your video on, and we will acknowledge that at the end and answer any questions that you may have. Once your question is answered, you can click it again and it will take your hand down. And so again, we want this to be interactive. There will be opportunities for you to engage with the panelists. We think that you're going to enjoy tonight's session, and we certainly thank you for being with us on this lovely evening. So with that, I'm going to get started with introducing our panelists, and we are really excited. We've got some diverse thoughts and diverse perspectives on here. And so with further ado, I want to start off with introducing you to Artemis Stoll, and just give you a little bit of the background that she shared with us. So for 21 years, Ms. Stoll, who is a Norfolk native, has lived with her husband and 2 sons at their Colonial Place home. And she optimistically believes that they will be done renovating by now. She says, not quite yet, but they're getting close. She earned her bachelor's degree in English from the College of William and Mary. She currently serves as the social events chair of the Colonial Place / Riverview Civic League Board. She also serves as membership vice president for the Friends of the Norfolk Library. She's active in the Tidewater chapter of Phi Mu, the alumni chapter, as well as the Larchmont Friends CHKD Circle and numerous other volunteer endeavors. And in 2007, she co-authored the book Colonial Place in Riverview, 100 Years of History, with then fellow neighbor and author Suzanne Van Heck. So I think that is pretty awesome that she has co-authored a book about the Colonial Place in Riverview area of the city. So congratulations on that, Ms. Stoll. She recently had the honor of serving on the judges panel for the Norfolk Preservation Collective's 2021 Preservation Awards of Excellence. She's been a history enthusiast for as long as she can remember, which is all the way back to elementary school, where she spent as much time as she could in the school's library reading and checking out historical nonfiction, especially biographies of notable female figures who helped shape our nation. So welcome, Ms. Stoll. Our next panelist is Charles Johnson. Charles he has an interest in adolescent development. His interests are also divided between downtown, also known as Old Town North neighborhood, Portsmouth, Virginia, and East Roberts Park, which is now known as Broad Creek. He is retired after 43 years as a public schools social studies educator. Okay, kudos for the 43 years, Charles. He is the current president of the African American Historical Society of Portsmouth, vice chair of the Historic Addicts Theater Board, the African American Cemetery Sleuth in Hampton Roads, and president of the Park Place Civic League. In short, where he lived, places he's worked, memberships and groups, and a passion to research, preserve, and educate others on the past, present, and future is a reason for his handle. If you look at his username, historian by profession in nature. Mr. Skiles is the president of the Beacon Light Berkeley Civic League and president of the Community Housing Development Organization, which has built numerous homes in the community. His family moved to Berkeley when he was 4 years old. He also is a retired educator. He has a master's of education from UVA. He's been married for 43 years with 2 children and 5 grandkids. So awesome. Hello, Mr. Skiles. Our next presenter is Kayla Hauberg. Kayla has a BA in history from William and Mary. She has a master's of arts in public history and historic preservation from the University of South Carolina. She is a project manager with Norfolk-based preservation consulting firm, Commonwealth Preservation Group, where she focuses on research, National Register nominations, and community engagement initiatives. So hello, Kayla. And our next, let me plug in my laptop so my battery doesn't go out. Our next presenter is Susan Mcbride. She also has a master's degree in historic preservation with a concentration in urban planning from Eastern Michigan University. She's been working in her chosen field for more than 20 years and in Norfolk for the last 8 years. She lives in one of Norfolk's mid-century neighborhoods, and she's excited to be part of a 300-year-old city with so much history. And then our last panelist is Sophia Latz, and she is a city planner for the city of Norfolk, staffing the Architectural Review Board. She has a master's of historic preservation from the University of Georgia. Okay, another Georgia graduate, from another Georgia school. When she's not enjoying her neighborhood of Ghent, she spends her time in hammocks or lounging on the beach. That sounds really nice, Kayla. Sophia. So thank you all to our panelists, and we look forward to interacting with you. So now that we have our introductions out of the way, we want to go into a few questions. And before we do that, I just want to give you a little bit about why we're doing this. So I had a conversation with some of the panelists that were on this call, and one of the things that we talked about is we all recognize that Norfolk is a city with a robust history. And one of the things that when we talk about preserving Norfolk's history, and if you notice, we talked about this being the Mermaid tales. If you were with us last year, you know that was a theme. We are the Mermaid City. And we know that within the city of Norfolk, the Mermaid City, there's so much history. There's so much to be said about Norfolk's over 120 unique neighborhoods. And so we have the opportunity with today's panel and with today's session to talk about why preserving that history is why that's so important. Not just the history, but the culture and the stories of those neighborhoods. So that history is just as much an important aspect of a community as the built environment, as the buildings and the infrastructure that you see present. And so with today's panelists, we have an opportunity to hear from them as to why they are why they're so focused on preserving the history of their respective neighborhoods, as well as to hear from our 2 groups, from the planning department, as well as the Norfolk Preservation Collective, as to why they're really focusing on making sure that Norfolk's history is collected. So with that, I want to get started with our resident panel with Artemis, Charles, and Lawrence. And so if we could start with you, Artemis, and feel free to unmute yourself. The question that I have is, what's one interesting detail people may not know about your neighborhood?
Ooh, there are so many. That was a tough question. So I think that one interesting thing about Colonial Place is that, so we are Colonial Place and Riverview. So it's the two neighborhoods combined under one civic league. So in Colonial Place the streets were named after 13 original colonies, and it followed suit with the 1907 Jamestown Exposition, which is about the time we were founded. And all of the streets have the 13 original colonies names, which is a really neat thing when you're going through geographically. If you can't remember how the states are laid out along the East Coast and, throughout the 13 original colonies, it's kind of neat to just remember where everything is. So that is an interesting thing about Colonial Place. And Riverview actually started as a tract of land that was divided, and Riverview is smaller geographically than Colonial Place, and it was started as a tract of land that was divided and subdivided, and I think it was 4 or 5 different neighborhoods at one time. So, and it is now one, and that was in 1900, so that predated Colonial Place. So I started at the beginning. There's the interesting fact from the beginning of the neighborhood.
Thank you for sharing that information. I will say I've been in this area now for 20 years. The Navy brought me here, and I am just learning today about those streets being named after the 13 original colonies. So thank you for sharing that little bit of history. That is really interesting and very informative. And so now I want to turn it over to Charles, asking you the same question. If you could share a little interesting fact about Park Place.
An interesting fact to me, and probably to the media and people throughout this area, is that there is no one Park Place. And that's why I say it's interesting, because Park Place actually is 4 subdivisions. And most people are not aware of that. The 4 subdivisions, you see the map in front of you, that is the historical Park Place subdivision, going back to 1890. It was the suburbs growing, and you had Virginia Place, which is in purple. You have Kensington, which is in green. You have Old Dominion Place, which is in blue, and Park Place in red. So at the turn of the century, 1890 to 1899, these 4 areas that were carved out of the farm were started as a suburb. And from 1899 up until around 1961, the next map, please. Well, you can't see the
I
map.
think that's the map. That's the one map that we have, Charles.
Oh, you can get that. Well, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, the other map would show you what's within the 4 subdivisions today, and we call that the Park Place Civic League area. And it is composed of those same 4 subdivisions, but it is not as expanded as you see there. It's a little smaller. It goes over to Colley Avenue. It goes down to the old Norfolk and Western Railroad track, which was developed in the 1890s. And it is still Granby Street, and 38th Street is still the northern section. So with these 4 subdivisions, you have this community that is very diverse economically, socially, politically, and historically. And to me, that is an interesting fact, so people can know when someone says Park Place, they may be talking about the subdivision Park Place, they may be talking about the Park Place Civic League, they may be talking about the Greater Park Place Task Force, they may be talking about the Park Place Planning Commission. But when we talk about Park Place, we talk about one of the neighborhoods in our Civic League area.
Mr. Johnson,
For,
that was my fault. I thought the maps were the same. I did not look at them in close enough detail, but I can display the other one if you want.
Okay, and they're very similar. Most people think that that's the historical map that you're looking at now. That is the present map. And you see it's more defined. It's not all over here and there, because the old one showed when there were creeks and farmland. Now we have the boundaries of the streets. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Charles. Again, been here 20 years now, almost 21, and I just learned something new today. So I feel like as I turn it over to Mr. Skiles, I'm going to learn my third new thing. And so, Lawrence, if you wanted to share something interesting about your neighborhood, we'd love to hear that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I of course I'm from Berkeley, and as I stated in my information, I moved here when I was 4 years old, and of course stayed until I was a teenager, went off to college, and came back, moved to Chesapeake, and I think like you, Miss Artemis, I actually we have a house that was built in 1900, and I actually came back and bought it from my mom, and I've been working on it for forever. It seems like you never do finish these old houses, and so it was a labor of love at first, and now I think it's just labor. But anyway, but it's always something to do. But it's a beautiful old home, and so I probably the catalyst for me coming back was during the storm Isabel. And after it hit about 13, 15 years ago, I came back and I said, Mom, I've got to, you can't live here like this. So I just decided, I need to buy it from you, and then move to a smaller place. But anyway, so I've been here for that long. And let's see. Well, Berkeley started off like as a mining town right back in the 1600s, and it has seen a lot of different changes. And as a matter of fact, the founder of the neighborhood was, I believe it was Lycurgus Berkeley, I believe it was, and he founded it and started. Says we need to make a neighborhood out of this, or start building churches and some buildings. And this was in the probably the mid 1800s. And and my house was actually here before we became incorporated in Norfolk. I was part of Norfolk County when the house was built. And I live probably, depending on which way you go, next to the city of Chesapeake. So we're one of the farthest parts of Norfolk. And what's interesting about my neighborhood? Well, I'll read this to you. General Douglas MacArthur, I don't know who knows who he is, but General Douglas MacArthur's mother, Mary Pinckney Hardy, had long family roots in Norfolk. She was born and grew up on the River Edge estate located on Berkeley's South Main Street. That's where my house is. So when she was living, she might have been looking at the neighbors who live right in my house today. And a lot of because Berkeley has been a active community probably since, I don't know, at least well, our Civic League has been around for like 77 years. So we've had active folks a long time. When we were a little more segregated, we had one of the first people, Minnie Madger, who actually worked in one of the clothing stores. And of course, back then that was a big thing, and but we have active members of the community, and we have named actually some of the buildings in Berkeley after some of the people who have played a big part, a huge role in Berkeley. Sykes High Rise, of course, George Banks, and of course, one of the newest buildings have named after him. The library over here, the branch over here, that's Horace Downing. So we've taken a lot of the folks who've worked very hard to sort of put Berkeley on the map, and who's worked very hard in our community. We've named buildings after them. And so I just wanted to make note of some of those types of things.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Skiles. Again, as I shared, I figured I would learn something new, and I did. I saw Charles nodding his head as you were going through. So I know, as one of our local historians, that there were some things that you shared that he definitely had some remembrance of. So thank you. So I want to move on to our next set of questions. And I will start with Charles for this one. And it is, what do you want younger generations to know about your neighborhood's history?
Well, I want the younger generation to keep in mind, well, as a historian, and you've probably heard it before, that if a person knows something about their history, they know something about themselves. And many of the youth in my community don't know a lot about the community. And because of that, they don't fully understand what's going on sometimes in this community as we develop. What I mean by that, I always try to emphasize to them that what we call park plays, or the four subdivisions, is centered around three key words: segregation, de facto, and then I move on, redlining, and then I come into diversity. And they look at me and say, what are you talking about? I said, what you see here today in the Park Place Civic League area is not what was here in 1890. Because from 1890 to the 1950s, it was de facto segregation, white. From the 1950s, technically speaking, up until around the 1980s, it was de facto segregation, black. In 2021, you see a more diverse community, a community that is 50 years was white, 50 years was black, and now there are groups from all around. And if they could work it out 50 years ago as one race and another 50 years as another race, why can't we come together and make this community for the next 50 years diverse, together, work? And that's what I try to explain to them.
Thanks so much for that, because I think one of the things that we see in the city of Norfolk, and one of the things that really attracts me about this city, is I love the diversity of the neighborhoods, not just the character, but I like to go into neighborhoods and see where there is a mix of people. I like to interact with persons that are different from me and have different backgrounds and different ethnicities, different cultures. I think that's what makes us a strong city, is that diversity. And so to talk about that transition, Charles, from predominantly white, predominantly black, until now you have a neighborhood where there's opportunities and there's space for everyone to feel like they can be a part of what makes Park Place great, is really encouraging, especially for future generations. So thank you for sharing that with us. Artemis, I want to deviate just a little bit with you, because I'm still fascinated that you wrote a book. And so I want to know a little bit more about what led you to co-author that book about Colonial Place in Riverview.
Okay. So it was for our centennial. In 2007, we knew it was coming up, and my former neighbor and co-author, she was already an established author at the time, and the president of the Civic League approached her and asked her if she would be interested in doing something. I think she kind of was having the idea to do this, to do more like a pamphlet or just a collection of the historical facts of the neighborhood. And then that's when he actually approached her and said, would you be willing to do this and put your talents to a project like this? And we could try to fund it and make it into a hardbound book and, make it really exciting. And so she knew that I had written some at the time, but not that much, professionally as much as she had, and project. And so I knew that she was an already established author, and I thought, oh my gosh, she can show me the ropes. And so I said, yes, I would love to partner with you on this. And that's when we began, and we started researching and dove deep. We both had 3-year-old boys at the time, so we would drop them off at preschool, run to the library, and go immerse ourselves in the stacks and go to the archives at which was then the Sargent Memorial Room at Kern Library. And then we would go pick up the children and go right in the evening. So that's kind of how it all evolved. And then we got some funding through some real estate agents who were in the neighborhood. And then we had it published locally through Dawning, and that's how it came to be. So it was far beyond what we had ever imagined it could be. So we were pretty excited. We still are pretty excited about it.
As you should be. And if we wanted to get a copy of that book, where could we find it?
The problem is we did a limited run, so it is actually out of print, but we're trying. See, Susan has moved out of the neighborhood, and I'm trying to find the time to bring this back into publication and maybe add some facts and information that we found after we printed it. They ran an article in the newspaper, and we had a book signing. And at that book signing, the most interesting thing happened. People came out of the woodwork, and we found that so many people have a connection to Colonial Place, and they told us all these facts and relations that they had. And somebody was the great grandchild of one of the builders, a prominent builder in the neighborhood. So we were madly taking down information and contact information. And, should there ever need to be a second edition, second volume, we thought that would, lead to that. But life got in the way, and it's never happened yet, but it's certainly something that could happen. So it is available at the library. Sargent has a copy, so you can get it there. And I have a couple of copies, and I would be willing to loan my own personal copies out if somebody's really interested in looking at them.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to talk to you offline about that. And if you decide to print that again, make sure you let us know so that we can share that. And let's all take an opportunity to, now that the libraries are reopening, even in limited capacity, we have an opportunity to go and check out that book. So thank you, Artemis. I want to turn it over to Mr. Skiles and ask you this question. And I know that you have and I see Jim, is that a joke?
No, that's not a joke.
It's no joke. That's really what people are listing them, for kind of ridiculous prices. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So if time permits, we will come back to that, because I was not expecting that. But Mr. Skiles, the question I have for you is, can you tell me how you, and maybe some others, because I know that you are also a bit of a historian. What are you doing to preserve your neighborhood's history, or what are you doing to share that history with others?
Well, like I think all of us, when we get a chance to tell the story, that's what we do. I'll just say recently, we worked with, when the government came with FEMA, and we actually canvassed the neighborhood to get the word out to get vaccinated. And so the people who were there, who actually went around and canvassed, of course, when they go to a new area, they're interested in it, and what is this building, and I never heard of this place, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, by the time we finished talking with them and explaining and talking to them about the histories, not just of Berkeley, but the entire area, and how it's changed, and the good things about it, or whatever. So, and they were very interested, and a couple of them said, well, I might move here. But what we do is we just, again, keep the history alive. We have a brand new library, the Tucker Library, again, named for a member of our community that's brand new, a wonderful, beautiful place. And you guys got to come to it. It's on the corner of Berkeley Avenue and Campbell Road, by the pool, by the Aqua Center. And of course, again, we have the Horace Downing Library. We have the annual Berkeley Reunion, very large affair that we have over here in Berkeley. And we incorporate educational activities as well as the music. And so it's a big festival type thing, cookouts, and families come back from wherever they are. We've even had one come back from Australia to be with us. But so we do that, and we do that, of course, so that we allow people to have fun. Well, we don't allow them, but they have fun with this. We have a historical society over here that keeps records of and old pictures of things that's happened in Berkeley, and of course anyone who has any old photos can add to that. and that's usually out here when we have the reunion, so people can walk by and see the old elementary schools that were torn down. One that I went to, Gatewood, that now the fire station sits on that property. But you know, we of course our mayor comes from here, our honorable mayor, and so you know these folks grew up and probably maybe like Mr. Johnson was saying, we know that unfortunately some of the ugly history it did affect us, and of course thank God for you, all of you, and people of goodwill and people who are thinking how to be positive. A lot of folks have come out of that, and but it used to be a time that, you know, we had this feeling, perhaps, and not all of us, that, you know, it wasn't a lot that we could do. You know, we do the best we can. And of course, there were some of us says, I don't care what any of you say or whatever people say, we're gonna always do our best. But we've had some wonderful people come out of here who've accomplished some great things. But that was a part of the history. So when we say the things that we say, we explain to them, we talk to them about the history and the folks that have come through, and the fighters and the folks who were not going to settle. And then, of course, we can say our mayor lives right around the street from us, that kind of a thing. So these are all positive things. And of course, we've had other people that I can name, but I won't do that, who played a part in Berkeley. And I think one of them played a big part of going to Liberia, I believe, and becoming one of either the president or high in the cabinet there, way back in I guess the earliest 20th century or whatever that was. But again, I don't have that detail right in front of me. But again, these are the things that we talk to them about. We have scholarships that we give each year, a couple of scholarships during our reunion. I work with another organization called the Clean Organization, and that's run by our vice president, also the chairman of our board, Anthony Daniels. That's called the Clean Organization, and he works with youth, and we hold mock interviews, job interviews with them when we can. Of course, the pandemic has put, you know, just a damper on just about everything, so we haven't had a chance to do these things, but we look forward to doing those kinds of things again.
Thank you. There's a lot going on at Berkeley, and so I know that you all have the Berkeley Historical Society. So please be sure, if you are attending to, for those of you in today's session, please make sure that you connect with Mr. Scouts outside of this, because they are a wealth of information on the South Side. And thank you to our resident panel. There's so many other questions that I want to ask, but we got to leave space at the end for the things that have been posted in the chat and for the questions that are going to be verbalized. So I just hold on with us to the end. We're going to move on now to Kayla, who is a member, and I want to make sure I get this because I want to share their tagline, the Norfolk Preservation Collective, where they focus on education, avocation, and celebration. I did a little wordsmithing with that. So Kayla, I'd like to, if you could share a little bit about the Norfolk Preservation Collective. We'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Again, my name's Kayla Hauberg. I'm on the board of directors for Norfolk Preservation Collective. Really happy to be here tonight and to be a part of this. I really feel like I'm here among the greats in Norfolk, and just really pleased to sit on this panel with you all. I look up to you all and love all of the work that you guys do. So NPC, a little bit, switch gears to NPC now. We were founded in 2019 with the mission to educate, advocate, and celebrate historic preservation in the city of Norfolk. And in 2020, while we were all sitting at home, we did a lot of work behind the scenes to become a registered 501c3 nonprofit. So we're official. Our vision, we've also worked a little bit over the last year to really think about what our vision is for the community. And that is to promote the positive impacts of preservation and to bring together a diverse and inclusive network of residents, professionals, and businesses interested in history, architecture, place, and community. So as you know, Anicia said earlier in the session, Preservation isn't just about pretty buildings to us. That's an important part of it and why a lot of us got into this. It's why I got into this, but that's not all that we're focused on, because people are the reason why we have things to preserve, and people make up these amazing communities that we love. So we're really people focused at NPC. So if you want to switch to the next slide, I know I put some images in. So we host a variety of programs such as the Preservation Awards of Excellence, which both Artemis and Charles have served as judges for. So we thank you very much. We recently held this year's awards last week. And we also host behind the scenes tours of renovation projects, some bike tours of different neighborhoods, and special programs like this one tonight. We've also attended community events like Engage Norfolk and Say Fest in Park Place to engage with the community and have open conversations about history and preservation. So if you go to the next slide or next image. So the next few images are from some of our volunteers at Say Fest in 2019. We asked our attendees to put a star on their favorite places in Norfolk and to also put a star over the neighborhoods where they lived. And this helped us spark a lot of conversations about places that are important to the community, like schools, churches, entertainment venues came up, like Scope and Chrysler Hall, Slover Library, the Botanical Gardens. So we were able to really have just open and kind of informal conversations with people about places that they love, why they love those places, and really just started to spark conversations about place and preservation. And during the month of May, which is Preservation Month, we like to focus on people and places, and especially during in 2020, we decided to do some social media campaigns since we could not meet in person. And we really follow the model of the National Trust's hashtag Displace Matters last year, and which is a national campaign that they've been promoting for several years. So you want to switch ahead to a few. Oh, and here's the mayor at Say Fest looking at our our map to see where everybody was coming from. So we were really happy he stopped by. Okay, you can go ahead and switch. Oh, here's a few more. I included a lot from Say Fest. And then the next photo here is from May last year. And so we also asked people last year to take selfies on their porches in their neighborhoods and use the hashtag PreserveNFK, which is our Instagram handle, to start collecting photos of people in their favorite places around the city, and to also start to tell their stories and why they love the places that they love. And this year, the focus has shifted a bit at the national level and the local level here. And the National Trust has started a campaign called hashtag Tell the Full Story. And so with this, we're looking to tell, we're really looking to tell more inclusive stories to make sure that stories that are representing underrepresented communities are coming out, and that we're really starting to talk to people and have more oral history interviews. We have a lot of mid-century history in Norfolk and Virginia, around the country, that's really significant to who we are as a community and as people today. And there are still people living who lived through that history. So we NPC are working on a project to help tell those stories about Norfolk's people and places, using oral history interviews, social media, and some mapping to pinpoint those places that are important to our communities, to start having those open conversations about some of the topics that you all have brought up tonight: redlining, segregation, urban renewal. So, integration of schools and neighborhoods. There are stories to tell all over the city. And we know that there are people here who can help us tell those stories because they lived through them firsthand. So we are, again, we're all about community and people that have made history and also make preservation possible today. So we hope that this event will be a springboard for these initiatives, and we hope that you'll join us in these conversations and help us document these places that are important to us.
Thank you for sharing that, Kayla. And I just want to ask a follow-up question, because you talked about a couple of different areas of Norfolk's history that you're focusing on. So for those that are in attendance today, and for people that are going to watch the video in the future, why should they know about your organization and the work that you're doing?
Oh, that's a tough question. Well, I think that Norfolk Preservation Collective has really sort of come together with a very grassroots or a really grassroots level organization, and we're all really committed to this. And I'll say that my board has done a lot of work over the last 2 years, very short amount of time, and I think we've accomplished a lot. And I think that this direction that we're going in is really important and really critical for our growth as an organization, but also for the growth of our city, and to come around some of these topics that have just been really difficult, and to start having those conversations about that difficult history, and in the hopes that we can, educate future generations, but also promote community healing and, kind of highlight these places where history happened, and talk about them. And we're ready to do it, right, Jackie? Yeah, we're here to be a resource, and we want to be conveners, and that's why we want people to know about us. So we want to help foster these conversations and document these places.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I do want to point out that one of your board members is with us today, Jackie Glass, who's also the Civic League president for Ballantyne Place. And I will say there's a lot more to the Norfolk Preservation Collective that I learned from talking to Jackie about, and how they've expanded from Freemason again. And there really is a focus on inclusion. So there's so much more to this. And so again, I encourage those that are present and those that will be watching in the future to reach out to one of these two ladies so that you can get more information about what this group is doing. I think it's a really interesting thing. And I think that it also segues into our next presenter. Thank you so much, Kayla. We are going to come back to you with some questions at the end. And so now we want to move over to our planning department, the best planning department in the state of Virginia, might I add. And so we have Susan and Sophia, and I want them to talk about what I think is a really, really interesting initiative. And it really talks, I know that there is a focus on inclusion, something that Kayla just spoke on, and Mr. Skiles and Mr. Johnson kind of touched on this earlier about some of the history of Norfolk and where we are now. And so Susan and Sophia, do you mind talking a little bit about the effort that you're working on with the state?
Sure thing. Thank you all for having us. My name is Sophia Latz. I'm a city planner here with the Department of Planning. And Susan and I'm going to take over the Survey Norfolk portion, and I think she's going to talk a little bit about what initiatives we currently have, or what tools we currently have in Norfolk to help foster that. So I'm going to share my screen if you'll give me a moment. Can you all see this? Okay, great. So Survey NFK is our multi-year historic resource survey. What this means is that we're over the next 5 or so years, and hopefully beyond that, we're going to be capturing what we call the recent and as yet untold histories, and then documenting those historic resources that tell that history or those histories. The last update to the city survey, historic resources survey, was about 20 years ago, and I'm going to be using the term historic resources quite frequently throughout this. It just means any building, object, site, district, landscape that is 50 years or older. And as of this year, that means 1971. So you Gen Xers are coming on up here. But what that also means is that we're going to be looking at, or going to be focusing on mid-century modern architecture, which goes from the mid 40s in through the mid 70s. And there's a few different definitions, but that's loosely where we're focusing a lot of our efforts on. So as I said, the last survey of the city was about 20 years ago, and in that time, surveys have drastically improved. Before, there weren't really many decent photos. The research was scant at best. Just better documentation overall and better technologies have really improved our surveys and what we do know and what we can document of historic resources. So in 2020, last year, during the beginning of COVID, there was the city contracted out a draft survey plan for Survey NFK, which kind of goes through what we are planning to do over the next several years. It gives us strategies and areas and threats to consider, and different sorts of themes to capture through these surveys. So in September of 2020, this draft plan was released to the public. It's on our website. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of all of my slides, this is our hub, www.norfolk.gov/survey NFK. And since then, we're now in the public comment and public outreach portion. You'll see that specific slide part is highlighted. And so what that means is that we're going to be reaching out to all of you, to your civic leagues, to your neighborhoods, and trying to get a gauge of what you find is historic, because it shouldn't just come from us. As Kayla said, preservation is about community, and we want to preserve what Norfolk is inspired by, or what it feels is historic, and that's completely dependent upon neighborhood, and that means different things to different people. So that's kind of where we are right now, trying to get a gauge and an idea of what your thoughts are going forward and what you think is historic. So some of those that the survey draft plan has released are some themes to capture: annexations and associated development, civil rights and women's rights movements, education, ethnic heritage, funerary, industry, LGBTQ heritage, military and defense, post-World Wars residential and commercial development, tourism, social recreation, and transportation. And these are just broad themes that they thought that a thematic survey should capture. It also looked at threats. As we all know, sea level rise is constant, and it is increasing, and does affect our historic resources quite dramatically. Redevelopment, neglect, demolition and uncomplimentary infill, demolition of historic resources, and trying to really keep an eye on poor things or new development in historic neighborhoods that don't really fit. And so then there were a number of priorities that they also listed. From that priorities, we have kind of come up with our own plan, or at least what we are looking at doing with help from the community to weigh in on this. So we are planning on prioritizing our surveys by neighborhood interest. Those that want to be surveyed, or those that want themes to be captured, or that are historic resources to be addressed. The ones that want it are going to be prioritized. Then we're going to go to non-inventoried areas, which means areas that haven't been surveyed in the past. Concurrently resurvey West Freemason and Ghent. Those haven't been surveyed since the 70s, and there's a lot of mid-century infill that is important. And then there are older state and national districts by order of oldest first. And then again, the thematic surveys, as I mentioned before, and that can move up or down dependent on who is interested and, you know, how the city wants us to proceed. So we are looking at over the next, I guess, starting next Wednesday, May 26th, over the next 5 weeks or so, we're going to be looking at visiting your civic leagues virtually and working on getting y'all's input. So we're going to start, I guess, in the north side, coming along an axis over on Ocean View, and then do the west side, the east side, the southwest side, and then following up with the south side. And so that'll be over the next 5 or so Wednesdays. And then I just kind of wanted to give an idea of what we mean by mid-century modern. This is an apartment building in West Freemason. The Babette Smith Halls at NSU. The Baden Arts and Letters Building at ODU. The Coca-Cola Bottling Company on, I believe it's Granby Street, and 21st. Dumars, which has a great sign. St. Pius X. A Levitt development, which is just a small houses that kind of really started the suburban neighborhood trend. Lustern houses, which are completely made of metal, and they are fabulous, and they're rare. You find a lot of them in like Cleveland and in Ohio and around Navy bases and military bases, but they're really cool. And then some other typical homes you might see. We do have some Spanish flair. We kind of think that that's due to the Navy and San Diego, but cool ranch houses as well, which are important and are really, really cool, and people need to recognize that. On Camellia Road, it's a fabulous home. And then, as I said, norfolk.gov/survey NFK. We do have a poll out right now that you can click on from that website, and that will, kind of quickly go through an idea of what do you feel is historic, what themes do you think we should capture, what neighborhoods, and kind of get an idea of where the community is, trying to get our pulse on what Norfolk thinks is historic. So with that, I've got our contact information, and I do see Kayla's asking me how long will the poll be open? Through the end of June. We're planning on finishing up all of our public comment for this, again, draft plan by the end of June, by June 30th, hopefully. So that'll be open for another month and a half-ish. It's been open since, I think, the end of February or the beginning of March. And so that's it. That's kind of giving us an idea. We're constantly getting new feedback in about what people think is historic, and what buildings and what neighborhoods they really are interested in. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan, and apologize for going over time.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm going to do mine pretty quick. Let's see. Share. Is mine up on the screen? Are people seeing it? Okay. Oops, that's not it. Hold on a minute. How did I do this wrong? Why does it keep doing that? So anyway, I'll just do it this way. I'm sorry. So this is neighborhood preservation tools. This kind of brings it all together. This has a lot to do with zoning, and I'm not really the zoning expert, but I can tell you that there are options in your neighborhood depending on your neighborhood's level of comfort with what you would like to do. So this comes out of a concern that residents had raised about compatible design of infill of new construction in their neighborhoods. As Sophia had noted, that people have concerns about incompatible infill. And so in our, we call it new zoning ordinance, but it's been out a few years now, the city moved to form standards to try and get better, say, contextual designs within the neighborhoods. And we always have had 4 character districts. If you look at the map, they're color coded: downtown, the traditional area in kind of the orange color, suburban in yellow, and coastal in green. We have corresponding pattern books or design guidelines to a certain extent for any properties that are city owned or have to go through any kind of city rezoning or development certificate. Except for suburban areas, we do not have any pattern books in those areas. So the current, there was a concern that the current form standards aren't sufficient to protect the character of the community. And this came out of, actually, Mr. Johnson will probably be able to speak to this more, but Park Place was very concerned that they were seeing a lot of, because they have a lot of room for development in their neighborhood, they were seeing a lot of suburban type housing going in with front loaded garages, attached garages in a neighborhood that's traditional, where you saw garages that should be detached and into the rear of the house. And then, so they were the first ones to establish a neighborhood resilience overlay, and which is another form of overlay that sits over your current zoning, but it tightens up a little of the form standards to give a little bit better context to the neighborhood. Colonial Place and Riverview have recently followed through with this. So for instance, just the general form standards say in the traditional neighborhood that the elevation of the first floor above grade should be 24 inches. Minimum covered porches should be no less than 48 square feet. There should be windows and doors on every facade. Primary entrance or your main front door should be on the street side, etc. Well, those don't, the 3 neighborhoods that I mentioned didn't feel that that was really compatible with the nature and design of their neighborhood. So with the neighborhood overlay, the Colonial Place and Riverview said, we want at least an 8-foot deep porch. We want at least 50% of the porch across the front facade. You know, they had garage restrictions. They said their house ground floor is at least 24 to 36 inches. So they felt that these were more compatible. They didn't feel they were ready to commit to, say, a local historic designation. They wanted to see if infill development could become more compatible without going to a more restrictive type zoning of historic designation. So the preservation tools that you have is, we have the form-based code, which is the most general. All parts of the city have it. It's just the current zoning. Then neighborhoods have an option of creating a neighborhood resilience overlay, which creates a more contextual feeling to your existing neighborhood to try and get infill development to look more compatible with your neighborhood. And so in this case, you would have to work with the planning staff to establish this, and then City Planning Commission would have to approve it and recommend this to be approved by City Council. Or if you felt like this just wasn't preserving your neighborhood in a fashion that you would like, then there's always an opportunity for a local historic designation if your neighborhood meets survey requirements, but the neighborhood has to petition the city with at least 51% of the neighborhood supporting this, which is a big reason why we're doing the survey, to see what we've got out there. It is the most restrictive, where all exterior alterations that are visible from the public right of way would have to be reviewed by the Architectural Review Board. The guidelines are established based on the broad guidelines of the National Park Service, preservation guidelines. So this would be material changes, new construction, demolition, and they would need a certificate of appropriateness. And those neighborhoods you might be familiar with are Ghent, West Freemason, and the downtown historic overlay. So you can see there's a progression if you're interested. I know, talking to Jackie in the past, that she's concerned about her neighborhood and which way they might be able to go. So there's always options to try and combat what residents may feel is happening in their neighborhoods. So like I said, I'm not the expert on that, but I am happy to talk to your neighborhoods more about this and connect you with the people that can help you with the overlays, or Sophia and I can work with you on survey. If you guys are really excited to become historically designated, we can prioritize surveying your neighborhood first. We're here for any questions that you might have, and we're very excited to be working with you in the month to come and the years to come. We're also going to be working with the Norfolk Preservation Collective on our community outreach. So we are looking forward to getting out there and talking to people, and we're here for you.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Susan. And I think it's really helpful for you and Sophia to be here today to kind of talk about some of the technical tools that are available to Norfolk's residents for the betterment of Norfolk's communities. And so here's an opportunity for those of you that are with us today and for our future viewers to be able to see that there is an opportunity both from the storytelling and the historic preservation side of it, in terms of talking about preserving the character and the values of that community. But on the city side, and also working through the Norfolk Preservation Collective, you have an opportunity to talk about how do we preserve that physical character of our communities as well. And so that's definitely a great takeaway. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put those in the comment section, or if you would like to verbalize your question, use your raise hand feature so that we can call on you. We are getting close to the end of today's session. If you also look, you will see that Jim has posted a poll. We always like to know what you thought about the sessions that we provide to you. And so please be sure that you complete that poll before you leave us today, so that way we can know what you thought about today's session, and if you have some thoughts about some things that we could do to benefit you for future sessions. So with that being said, are there any questions that anyone has? And Jim, could we go back to the full screen, and so that way I can see if there are questions from the audience? And one last thing I will say, thank you, Jim, for putting up the last slide. I think everybody on here is familiar with the NBN Academy, but we certainly encourage you to take a look at that page and sign up for some of our future courses. We've got some exciting things planned for the summer, along with some events. So be on the lookout for that. The team has been working on some really exciting events, and we can't wait to roll those out and hopefully have you participate in some of our upcoming sessions, as well as some of our summer events. And so now, Jim, are there any questions for our panelists in the chat section?
I don't see any recent ones. I believe Miss Redding had some questions about Michigan. Is there a Michigan Avenue in Colonial Place or something? If I scroll up there, Michigan Avenue How that got its place, that doesn't seem to fit in one of the 13 colonies. So that was a question for Ms. Stoll from earlier.
Yes. So you are correct. That does not fit in with the 13 colonies. That was a little short offshoot street, which was originally named Gray Street. And don't know why it was named Gray Street. Never found that, but it was. And up until the 1920s. And then in the 1920s, it was changed to Michigan. Again, a bit of a mystery, but it does not fit. So there has to be one exception to every rule, right?
Thank you. So that answers both questions. The next question that she had was about Gray Street. So that answers both those questions. I think that's all that, unless I've missed some in the chat room, that's all I see, Anicia.
All right, thank you for that. So what I will say is, if you have some aha moments, or if you're interested in either talking about how do you preserve the stories of your neighborhood, how do you get people engaged in making this a community effort, then you've got three great persons to talk to. You have Charles, you have Lawrence, you have Artemis. If you're looking at some of the technical tools to really help preserve the character of your neighborhood, then you certainly want to have a conversation with Kayla or Susan and Sophia. We do thank you for coming out and being a part of today's NBN session. We hope that you enjoyed the information that was shared with you, and we look forward to having you at our future NBN sessions.
Muted.
I'm sorry, I took my hand off the space bar, and thank you for that. I got excited. I started talking with my hands. So thank you so much to our panelists for coming out today. We thank you for all the information that you shared with us. It was really informative. And please, please, please make sure that you go to the Planning Department's website and complete the survey. And maybe next year you will be a part of the NPC's award ceremony. And with that, I thank everyone, and I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you. See you next session. Bye.